Mindy.
Hi, Lindsay. Welcome, everyone. This is Take the Lead, Change the Game, a podcast for women leaders looking to deepen their knowledge and skills and find enjoyment in the process. We are powered by Software Leadership. Software Leadership is a cohort-based experience designed to fuel courage and ignite impact among women professionals. I am Mindy Galati, and this is Lindsay Goldford Gray. We're the co-founders of Safra. Together, we bring a blend of leadership coaching, strategy, and lived experience to help women navigate their careers, their challenges, seize opportunities, and lead with confidence. This is the last of our three-part series on goal setting, and today we're going to talk about execution and follow through, including some common barriers and ways to hold yourself accountable to those goals. So welcome, Lindsay. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, me too, Mindy. So just to recap, in week 1, we really focused on the visioning piece because we feel like that's the place that you have to start. And it's hard to set goals without sort of having a vision of where you want to be, even 5, 10, or years down the road, or at the end of your career, at the end of your life. And so we focused on that in week 1. In week 2, we talked about the SMART goal framework and how to set goals in a way that's a really helpful way to think about it so that those goals are actionable and executable. And then today we're going to talk about that follow through and execution because life happens and things change. And so, Mindy, you want to kick us off talking about what are some of the common barriers that we see as people have their plan for their goals? Let's talk about for the year. What are some common barriers that, creep up as execution, becomes critical?
Yeah. And I think there's kind of 4 buckets for your own kind of barriers that you have some control over. And so we'll start with those. Perfectionism is a barrier, and we'll kind of describe these. Overload, which a lot of us feel, ambiguity. So your goals aren't actually that clear. And then shifting demands. The other thing I would say is we'll kind of dive into these, but then there's also like life and changes happen that are outside of your control that were never anticipated when you're setting a goal. And so these are the barriers, but the good news is most of these, there's something that we can do about, we can do something about them. And so we're going to kind of dive into each one of them. So let's start with perfectionism. A lot of people feel that if they set a goal, they have to be perfect in it. They have to achieve it to the T. So if the goal is, I want to get this certain promotion, or I want to make a certain amount of money each month, or whatever your goal is, if you don't do it, a lot of times people feel like they have failed altogether. So it's sort of an all or nothing proposition. And perfectionism can really hurt us because it can make us get stuck. And sometimes if you have this idea that you have to reach this goal by this time, and if you don't, then you've made no progress, you actually end up sabotaging your own progress. And so you want to set goals for sure, but you also want to sort of look at them, measure them almost like on a daily or weekly level so that you watch your progress, so that you're not so fixated on the one outcome, because that's how you can hurt yourself with perfectionism. What do you think about that, Lindsay?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I was talking with a client this morning who had set a very clear plan, and sort of as things changed and the train got going, it was like, oh, I can't sustain this. So remember that when we talked about, there's strategic goals, like the bigger vision goal, and then the operational goals are like the little pieces that, point you towards the bigger goal. And it was just too much. Some of it may be that you walk into it and it's just too much and you didn't realize how much it was going to be, which does happen. Some of it is you walk into it and you're like, oh, well, now I have these 6 other demands, and I can't sustain this. And I can't do it perfectly. And one of the things that we talked about was that's fine. That will happen. The plan that you put in, that you write down initially, will not be the plan that you execute fully. It's almost every case, you won't do every little thing depending on how comprehensive your plan is, but in a comprehensive plan, you probably won't do all of those things. Things will change. But I think an important part with the perfectionism piece is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like, don't say, oh, well, I can't execute on this one piece, or I can't do it perfectly, and so like I'm just going to give up. I mean, we see that oftentimes with all kinds of New Year's resolutions, right? Like people set goals, they get halfway through January or into February, and they're like, oh, I can't do this. Okay, I'm done. And so the monitoring that you're talking about, I think, is so important, where it's like, okay, maybe I set, to do like sort of business lunches. Let's say I set 3 times a week, and then you get into January and you're like, oh no, I can't do this. Maybe I can do once a week or twice a month. But it's important to redefine those things and then kind of recommit to the new plan, because otherwise the whole plan will just get thrown out the window.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we get stuck when we are chasing one super specific thing and don't allow life to come into play. So be careful with that. The other barrier is overload. You can think of this as kind of burnout. This is maybe you've set a goal and you're marching toward it, but you have not given yourself a break. You have not delegated certain tasks. And you've got to be very mindful about that. So, and some years are those years where you're going to work a lot. You're going to have to give a lot more. And I think that that's fine and that's reasonable and normal. But you have to be very careful about monitoring your time, making sure you're prioritizing the right things so that you don't run into that barrier of overload. Because the last thing you want to do is get uninspired to reach your goals. And I think you can get uninspired when you get burned out. And you'll just say like, oh, well, this is not worth it. So be careful. So this is, again, goes just like we talked about with perfectionism. You want to monitor what's going on. You want to check in on your progress routinely, consistently. And that may look like every day, may look like every week. And then watch yourself and give yourself a break sometimes, because, especially if you have a big goal, like I'm going to open a business, or I am going to take on this incredibly challenging role, it'll be very easy to just work yourself into the ground. So be mindful about that.
Yeah. And, a conversation that I was having with a client this week is your gas tank does not have to be at full all the time. Like this does not have to be, your pedal does not have to be all the way down all the time. And in fact, shouldn't be. And so, it's hard for those of us that are high achievers to say like, okay, well, maybe in this season of my life, like I just need to breathe a little bit. But there's not only value in that in terms of, I really liked you said, like one of the traps you can fall into, you don't want to get uninspired. And it's like, if we are just grinding it out with overload, we can get there really quickly. And also like unstructured time. I mean, the research is very clear that unstructured time inspires creativity. And so if some of your goals relate to, I mean, a lot of the work, you and I do for clients is like trying to solve pain points in their organizations and in their lives. And something that I've had a really too busy last 2 weeks. And one of the things I've been yearning for is like, I need time to like, just like think, right? I mean, the whole concept of like our best ideas come in the shower. Like there's actually research backed, we have this structured and can really think about it. So overload can be really, really painful for a couple of different reasons.
Yeah, and then we have a barrier of ambiguity, and so ambiguity can make it really confusing of like, what am I actually supposed to do? And so this is why in the very beginning you want to have clear goals. You want to have some priorities laid out, and you want to go back and remember those. So don't have a goal and just have it in your mind. You need to write it down somewhere. And then this is where like you can go back and refine your goals. So have a goal. Go, continuously go back and look at it. And then if it seems unclear to you now, that's a signal that, oh, you should probably be more specific, or you should prioritize. If your goal is so broad, that means you're going to have sub goals, have some priorities, because what can happen is that barrier, again, it could make you just feel lost. And so we want to make sure we're clear on where we're heading. And we don't succumb to just feeling like, oh, this is too overwhelming. My goal was too big, or my goal was too broad. We'll go back and get more specific and prioritize it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you haven't, for those of you that are listening and have not watched our last episode on setting SMART goals, in terms of ambiguity in your goals, this will help. Like the SMART goal episode
Yeah.
will help you a ton in terms of setting goals that are specific, actionable, and a number of other things that shockingly end up spelling smart.
Yeah. We love a good acronym, right? Like us lawyers were raised on acronyms, so we love that. And then there's the barrier of shifting demands, and so shifting demands is really common, and a lot of times it's kind of outside of your control as well. And so you want to stay flexible and adaptable, and you want your goals to be able to adapt. And I think this is, I think of this as being like, have a growth mindset, have curiosity, and also be agile. I teach a class on having an agile mindset as a leader, because we can really we can set our 2026 goals and priorities and just be like, let's go, let's do it. And then something catastrophic happens. And most of us who are, of a certain age, we were living through COVID where, major things happen. All of our priorities shifted, but it doesn't have to be so dramatic. It could be you get a new boss. It could be that your company gets acquired. It could be that, there is a socio-political, situation that happens. And so I think for those of us who are very type A, so me, probably you too, Lindsay, I think having hung out with you enough, we can get really, really rigid in, this is my goal, I've got to get there. And I think that's why it's important and I like to look at sort of things like go back monthly and be like, given the environment, is this still a reasonable goal for me right now? And sometimes that means I've already reached it, so I need to, make it a stricter goal. But anyhow, I think it's important to have that agile, flexible mindset, and it also helps you beat the overload as well. Actually, it can help you because you can just take a step back and take a breath. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking about this, I was thinking so much about, for those of you that don't know, my background is in immigration advocacy and immigration justice, and the nonprofit that I founded and led for about 5 years is in that space. And so when we, with the constant shifting political landscape, the humanitarian crises related to immigration, I mean, I'm still working with some immigration justice organizations as a consultant, and I have one organization I'm working for that I'm helping direct build up some of their training, and we've already had 2 different courses that we're working on that either we just stopped working on because there was some policy change or case law that came down that just totally changed it, and then another one that had a case come down that really potentially shifted what the course is going to be all about. And so being able to be like, okay, what do we do? I have a friend that had a big thing happen this week in the immigration space, and she was telling me that I went home and I just binge watched TV for a while. And I think that's so smart, because it's you don't have to solve this problem 5 minutes from now. It feels really anxiety inducing, but take a pause and then turn later.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say about that, and I'm sorry that my camera fell. I'm having technology problems today, folks. So I have had a laptop, a desktop, nothing's working. So thank goodness we have phones. This is one of those times where thank goodness we have a phone, but my phone is not cooperating totally. But one thing I want to say about this is all of this talk about goals, really one of your goals should be to have a routine for self-care. So the going home and binge watching. Have something that you do every day that has nothing to do with work, but that kind of gives you that space. And all of us have something different. And so I love that, because sometimes when we do have a big change or a big shift or something suddenly happens, a lot of us can go into problem solving mode, but that's often not the best place to go initially. The best place is to go and let your mind sort of absorb and just take a breath. So I want to talk about accountability, Lindsay, related to this. So these are the barriers. There's lots of barriers, but they fall generally in these areas. but you want to hold yourself accountable to your goals. And so what's one way you think people can do that?
Yeah, I mean, having accountability partners is so important. One, because you don't feel alone, but also like they'll be checking in. We run, Mindy, you and I run the software cohorts, and that's a great accountability group where, just this week, you and I asked like, how are your goals going? And so having that, I think is great. Mindy, when you and I are coaching, I often talk about the fact that you and I meet once a month and we talk strategy and we set goals, but we also set deadlines for each other. And then we're like looking back on those things. And so I think that's really helpful as well. And then I know we've talked about the weekly tracking and really kind of every so often, whether it's every day or every week or every month, setting aside time to sort of see your progress and adjusting where needed. But then I think the last one is one that you talk about a lot, and that is celebrating. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, why that is and why it's so important to you and should be important to everybody?
Yeah, and I'll tell you sort of why I think this, and then I'll bring up a conversation I had yesterday with someone. So I think it's really important to celebrate like small milestones on your way to your goal. So this helps you get away from perfectionism. It also helps you recognize like when you are tired, like, oh, I have made all this progress.
Yeah.
Lindsay and I, we were doing our Safra strategy session. We're like, wow, we've recorded so many podcasts. Like that was our goal. But it's like, you got to celebrate that because we've actually done that and it's been consistent. I think it's really important to have other people know what your goals are so they can help you celebrate too, because a lot of times they'll just be like, oh, well, you meet a goal, you meet a financial goal, you get a promotion, and you just kind of keep going. And I always tell people, like, when you've made some progress, like do something for yourself. Like, and again, that's very specific. Maybe you go to dinner, maybe you get yourself a little goodie, maybe you, whatever it is, like do something that acknowledges that and brag on yourself. I think it's good to brag on yourself, and it's not, there's nothing weird about that. But what I will say is I was having lunch with a law firm owner yesterday, and she does a lot of like business litigation, and she and I were just sort of like, wow, like we just go hard all the time. And we were sort of like, why do we go so hard? Why are, and I reminded her and actually myself, which is like, if we set a financial goal, because she was talking about her financial goals, like if we reach that financial goal in October, we should really pull back for the rest of the year. Yeah. And it was such an interesting conversation because I was like, that is so interesting, because maybe that's one of the keys is like to set your goals. And when you accomplish them, like give yourself a break, a breather. Yeah. And she and I were talking about how hard that is because we both met our financial goals like early in the year, but we didn't stop. We just kept going. And I think that was not just we weren't, I try to celebrate things that I do, but I don't think we recognize like that we don't have to push hard 24/7. And that's what happens with very driven, determined entrepreneurs, women, leaders. I just think there can be that tendency. So celebrating milestones is important. Do something for yourself, and then tell at least one person about it. And that actually kind of builds in an accountability partner too.
Yeah, definitely. I do think celebrating the wins is so important. I'll tell a story in that regard. So when I started Vicina, the nonprofit that I started, we didn't have any money. We'd never gotten any grants or anything. Obviously, like you can't really get grants or donations until you become a 501c3. Yeah. And I ended up leading a trip of folks from Lush Cosmetics, who I love, by the way, great company. They do really great humanitarian work, to the border. And as a thank you, they sent me and my family a whole bunch of Lush goodies, including bath bombs that my children got to use and benefit from. And then several months later, or maybe even just like a month later, we got our first grant, like monetary grant. And and so I was excited about it, and I was talking about it with my family, and the kids were like, oh, what happened, mommy? And my husband was like, oh, mommy got a big award at work or something like that. And then one of them goes, was it bath bombs?
Yeah, that's cute. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, you got to celebrate all the wins, including the
Yeah.
bath bombs. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Maybe you celebrate all your grants with a bath bomb then. But
Yes.
yeah, but I think, as we sort of round out this series, like, I think that generally people understand goals. I don't think people use them very effectively. I think what we've seen even in our software cohorts, we got together this week in person with our in-person cohort, and someone said, yeah, I haven't done anything on my goals. And that was her view, was that she had not done anything. Actually, she had. So
Yeah,
she was not, that was not accurate. But it was a great moment to check in and be like, what have I done? And, and she said, I've done nothing. And then we challenged her and said, well, let's look at your goals. And we pulled them up, and she has done some things.
Yeah.
But we need to surround ourselves with people. We need to realize the power of really good goal setting. It could really set you up for a lot of success. And I think it eases the stress. Even though it may sound stressful to hold yourself accountable to something, it actually will ease your stress if you do it properly. So
yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, we will be off the next 2 weeks for the holidays. And so we will see everyone back that first full week of January. I think the Thursday is January 8th. It might be the 9th. But anyway, we'll see y'all back in early January. And Mindy, I can't believe we've done so many podcasts. Look at us go.
Yay! Celebrate.
Knock out one of our goals.
Yeah, awesome. All right, everyone. We'll see y'all in 2026.
Take care. See you in 2026.
Take care. Bye.